but really it's just a benefit that's going to have to the 8 million New Yorkers, to the
Yes.
100,000 deaf or hard of hearing individuals, to their family members who maybe normally were the ones who had to be there when something happened, but God forbid they couldn't be there at that moment, that they felt guilty, like, man, I didn't know this happened to you. I wish I was there that day. Now, at the very minimal, we can ensure we're going to start because it'll take a while, but we'll begin to, at the very minimal, start having officers who will at least know four basic signs around, can I help you? Can I get you an ambulance? We're gonna have every officer trained on four basic signs of emergency needs. And then we're gonna take a group and we're gonna get them certified so that they can also communicate in sign language.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Gravity Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for choosing to tune in today. Hey, folks, we're keeping this conversation going. How do we stay grounded in a world full of noise and chaos? What are your foundations, your core values, those things you look to when you make really big decisions and that can really guide you? You may agree with my core values. You might disagree. That is not the point. The point is, what are yours? And I'm hoping here on the Gravity Podcast, we're bringing on guests and we're having conversations that's causing you to get curious. Because through some of my adult life, I never even asked this question. What are my core values? What guides me, right? Like I was sometimes, depending on the organization I was a part of, like the Air Force, their core values. The core values were good, but they didn't connect with my heart on the same level of what my personal ones are now. Today's guest is Deputy Commissioner of the New York Police Department, Wendy Garcia. I had the opportunity of meeting Commissioner Garcia at a training conference here a couple months back. Really enjoyed her talking points on equity and inclusion. And I sat there and thought, man, I know I got some people listening to my podcast that think of those as bad words. And I've heard some comments before that I went, ooh, I don't know if I agree with that. But then I listened to her explain what she was doing at the New York Police Department. And I was like, oh, I agree with that. Oh, I agree with that. And more, I started realizing that there were a lot of things that I agreed with. And so I thought it would be interesting to bring her on the show for her to explain what the initiatives are that the New York Police Department, the largest law enforcement agency in our country, is doing to make it a better workplace for their staff. So whether you like those letters or words or dislike them, I hope you stay tuned because I think Wendy's going to have some really great perspectives. But before we get into that, folks, I wanted to talk about the hat I'm wearing today. If you're watching on YouTube, Deliver Fund. Deliver Fund is a 501c3 nonprofit that's dedicated to hunting down truly evil human beings, the people that are kidnapping, the people that are forcing other human beings into bondage, slavery, and they're forcing them to do some type of labor. And we're not talking about in remote parts of the world, although that's just as bad. We're talking about right here in America. We're talking about Americans that are forcing other Americans into forced labor. And Deliver Fund is using their AI technology, and I can't explain it any better than just saying their spyware, right? I'm not talking about them getting into your stuff, folks. They're just using super cool, super secret stuff that we used to use to hunt terrorists around the world, and they're doing it to hunt human traffickers. You can join their team, not by being employed by them, but by going to their website at deliverfund.org. You can buy some of the wear, kind of like I'm wearing one of the hats today. They also have Thrivers Coffee that is selling coffee to go towards the same cause. Check them out again, deliverfund.org. With that, let's get into this interview with Deputy Commissioner Wendy Garcia. Wendy Garcia, welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Hi, how are you doing? How's everything?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited for you to be here. I'm excited just to hear more about what New York Police Department is doing under your department and your leadership. Yeah. Hey, for the listeners that don't know you, if you don't mind just introducing yourself to them.
Of course. So I'm Wendy Garcia, all the way from New York City, from a little island in the Dominican Republic.
Yes.
Via. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Equity and Inclusion at the New York City Police Department, the largest police department in the nation, 56,000 people altogether, 34,000
56,000.
officers.
Wow.
So I am very excited to talk to you about all the good work that's being done here.
Yeah. And I'm excited for you to talk about it because um, I was really, you and I met at a conference over here on the East Coast and American Society of Evidence-Based Policing, giving them a shout out.
Yes,
They,
of course. They did a great job too. They did a
it
good
was
job. It
amazing
was an
conference.
amazing conference.
And I really enjoyed just hearing the initiatives that New York Police Department has going on. And I think, at least for me, some of them were like, wow, I've never even thought about that because of who I am, right? And the reality is recognizing some of the what our other teammates are bringing to the table, and knowing, hey, there's something we need to do here. Just really valuable, and I really was excited to hear about it. So, equity inclusion, that's your department.
Mm.
How did you get hired at New York Police Department? Like, what
Yeah,
was?
yeah. I mean, I have a interesting story in that I've been in government now about my son's 16, so I've been in government now about 17 years. And I've worked at many departments. The last office I worked in, I was the chief diversity officer for the city of New York. And my role in my previous job, this was about 10 years ago, was to look at answering the question around how can New York City be more equitable, but more importantly is how do we look at the rules and the regulations of New York City and look and ask ourselves, are these so antiquated? Does it match with the population of New York City? What is it that city agencies need to do around that? So in the journey of that work, I met many people. One of them is the current police commissioner, who at that point did just a great job of making sure that he was addressing equity and inclusion through the lens of policing. And since then, I was asked to take a look at the police department. Would I consider applying and consider applying what I had learned in these other agencies and bring it to the department? So, as you know, the last place I thought that I would be recruited for would be the New York City Police Department. So it was a huge honor for me. I was also, like many people, um, just in shock to be asked to even come in for the interview. Um, and I met a lot of the work that happened to get to this position is that I was able to meet a group, an association of officers that their mission since they arrived at the police department was to create more equity and inclusion. So it was like fraternals like the Latino Association, the Dominican Association, and they had been working for years already to achieve more equity. And I met many of them. I heard their testimonies. I heard their triumphs, their challenges. Um, and to me, that was the most inspiring point. So, and when I came in for my interview, I was like, listen, there's no way I'd rather be but here. This is where I want to do it. I can see that there's a hunger for it, and I did feel like I would be an asset to the department, and at the same time, the department will give back to me too, that it was going to help me grow, but at the same time, I can also give what I bring to the table. There's going to be a mutual growth, on both ends. So, I came in, I gave it all I got. Of course, they interviewed a bunch of people. I made my case for why I thought I was the best candidate, and here I am.
I love it. And how long have you been doing it now?
The equity work, I've been doing it over 16 years, as I've been doing that in multiple agencies across the board. But now the police department, I've been here 2.5.
2.5 years. I love it. And what I just heard you describe was that you do a lot of listening.
A lot.
So let's talk about that because this is I honestly, this is what inspired my wife and I starting this podcast in the first place, is we felt like the American society, regardless of your politics, your religion, regardless of any of that, we felt like there was this breakdown in people's willingness to listen to other people.
Yeah, definitely. There is the work of equity is work that it's almost like if you don't listen, you can't solve for it. Under zero circumstances. I compare it a lot to a doctor. Like you go to the doctor's office, you say, "Hey, doctor, it hurts here and here." And if the doctor prescribes something for a stomach ache when you really had a headache because he or she were not listening, it can have a negative effect on your body. Equity
Absolutely.
is equity is the same way. If you're telling me that as a person of color, you're having a hard time navigating the police department, or you're telling me that childcare is an issue, and becoming because you want to become the captain of a precinct, but the hours are so tough. So now you have to kind of grapple with picking between the job and your family. And I also know that there are more single mothers and more head of households in New York City, right?
Yeah.
Those are concerns that if you don't listen to what they're really saying, you can miss how to solve for it. So if I have female officers telling me, hey, uh, I feel that I can't take on higher ranking positions, I have to listen for the why. Well, is the why that you feel that you can't take it on, or is the why that we have a structural issue that we need to solve for, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time, the answer is 1%. The person's just like, but 99% of the time, it's a structural issue that we can solve for. It's let's change the hours of operations. Let's relook at the criteria on how we're recruiting people for this. It's taking another look, like putting on a different set of goggles on how we normally run the business of PD, and applying a new way because we have a population that has different needs. Um, the diagnosis is really important.
Yeah. I like you talking about getting to the why.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be the old crusty 30-year veteran crossing my arms. But that's the
Mhm.
way we've done it, Wendy, or that's
That's
the
the
way
way
we've
we've
done it,
always
Deputy
done it.
Commissioner.
Yeah.
What are you going to say to me?
Yeah. I mean, the way we've always done it isn't always, listen, it isn't always correct. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna say because I could always compare equity to like day-to-day life. Just because you have come into your home every day on stairs doesn't mean we shouldn't build elevators. Just because your building has never had an elevator doesn't mean we shouldn't create an elevator so that you can get to the fifth floor faster. You know, I live in New York City, so there's a lot of buildings, right?
A lot of
That's
elevators.
that's this is the and so something so practical as easing how people get home or get to places requires a rebuilding of a structure. Equity is very similar. The way we used to do things may have worked for that particular time. But if we want to grow, we may have to change a little bit of our insides, right? So it may mean that we have always had bulletproof vests. This is a good example. We have always had bulletproof vests that were male dominant vests. But now we have females in the department. And that wasn't the case before. So yes, the way we've always done it is that we had vests that were predominantly catered toward men because the department didn't allow women to serve, right? We have 176 years in this department, and it could be that no one ever looked into it. They just weren't thinking about it for whatever reason. But now we have many women. So now we do, and while we may not choose, we're not making the vest in-house. We do have to have that conversation with the vendor and say, hey, remember law enforcement is changing. And since you are the manufacturer of these vests, as the customer, we have to start demanding that we have a new population because there's a
Yes.
safety concern. Females need a different type of vest because they're shaped, their upper body is shaped differently. I mean, that's the reality behind that. And if they are not protected, if the manufacturer doesn't create that vest in a way that protects them in their entirety, you may have a member of service, an officer at a time that they're in crisis, be have a huge safety concern only because the manufacturer never thought about it, because it's the way we've always done it, right?
Yeah.
And
100%.
so it's issues like that, but they don't come up until a new person introduces something that doesn't fit into the box that we used to do, right? So how do we know? I'll give you another example. This is a real life example. We have trans officers, and when they're transitioning, either when they're transitioning and they're changing their vest, we had never tracked before. The vendor at that time had never tracked that they were putting male and female into the alignment of the form. When really, when we had the conversation with the vendor, there is no male, female, it's only measurements. We had always, meaning that vendor had always called it male, female forms, but actually they were just measurement changes. It's a certain measurement for the upper body and then another certain measurement, and it had nothing to do with gender. We had always done it like that until we began to service a group of employees who now that didn't fit anymore. And so
Yeah.
now we had to go back and say, just because we've always done it like this doesn't mean we have to change it. And we were able to change it, which is the good news. And now we just do it based on measurements. But it created, when we were doing it the old way, we weren't servicing everybody.
I love that example, Wendy, because I know that that can be people can get fired up sometimes over that topic. But when it comes down to, hey, here's the deal: our brothers and sisters need bullet protection. I want the people I serve with, right, who go out in the streets and serve our community, to have bullet protection that properly fits them, that's going to do what it's intended to do, and and I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. That's the problem with some of the stuff. I feel
Right.
like
It's just safety. It's the
yes,
bottom line is just safety. And you want the person to be safe for you, for their partner, for the people that they're protecting. All those things, all those things matter in a time of crisis.
I feel like some of these things get politicized to the point that people want to sit there and argue. But if we get at the core root of it, kind of getting back to the why, the fact of, hey, we're dealing with human beings here. I had
Mm,
a I had an employee that his father-in-law died,
mm,
and it was like a father to him, and he wanted to take extended leave that was going to exhaust his leave bank, and he you had to get special permission for that, and then you'd be on unpaid leave, which is a choice employees can make.
right.
And it was initially denied, and I was, well, why? Well, we don't do it that way. I'm like,
Because we've never
oh,
done it like
we
that.
need we need to have a conversation here. I don't care how we've done it in the past. This is the right way for us to engage our staff. Right now, when we're dealing with mental health, physical health, when recognizing that the last few years have been really tough on our folks. And so if this is what one of our employees needs to mourn the loss and to handle the business of the loss of a father-in-law, mother-in-law, whoever within their family, let's let them do it. They're going to be more
Right.
connected with the organization when we're taking great care of them. They're not even asking for free time off. They're just
Right.
asking for what they've earned.
Exactly, exactly. And those are, look, families are changing, the context and how families exist are changing. The family of the 1900s is not the families we are seeing now. It's the reality. And you can walk outside and see that. And for the better, this is not a bad thing. But our institutions have to change with it. The way we do business has to change with it. The way we relate to each other, all those things come with it. And sometimes it just takes institutions a little longer to catch up. So a
Yeah.
lot of the work around equity is just catching us up with who who we're currently serving.
Yeah. The other one that you brought up, Wendy, was you specifically talked about, and this one connected with my heart because married to my wife, had the chance of being the dad to four daughters, and you talked about breastfeeding. Can you talk more
Yes.
about that? What New
Yeah,
York Police Department
definitely.
did?
This initiative was initiated by the federal government, and making sure that it's a protected class, that women who lactate, that would be an area that's protected. But one of the ways that we see it implemented in the department is that, along with the police commissioner's leadership, we decided that we were gonna implement that in every single precinct, meaning if you look at the federal guidelines, it tells you, please put, you have to have enough. But in our case, we have to have lactation pods everywhere because at any given point, you can have you can have a female at one precinct. New York City is very big, so we're not like other areas. Every part of New York City, every single neighborhood has at least one precinct. I mean, we're talking about 34,000 officers. So within those 34, at any given point, someone could be lactating at that time. The jobs vary. You could be a female that's on patrol on assignment and be, let's say, protecting a certain building at that time. Or you could be at a rally, or you could be just answering, you can be answering a radio call that comes in. Under all those circumstances, guess where you are not? Inside of an office being able to pump. You're either in a car, or you're on the if you're doing the train detail, you're on the train, or if you're at a rally, or let's say you're covering a parade, you are not inside near a refrigerator. I mean, but
Yeah.
we're gonna start there. So imagine coming back from maternity leave. Your baby's 3, 4 months, you've been there 3, 4 months old. Maybe you want to lactate for a year. But most of the time women may lactate for a year. You don't come back. You're not you're back to work. You're
Yes.
back to work. So you're back to work, and your work doesn't require you to be near a refrigerator. So we made sure to have lactation pods in every single precinct. So wherever you end up on the job, you always have a place that you can go, whether it's that you're on assignment, or let's say you work in transit. For us, it's the trains, like you work inside the trains. You have access to the ability to pump, and then you don't have to pick. You don't have that constant battle of like, man, today I'm working that 12-hour shift, or today I'm working night duty and I won't be able to. No, you have a place you can go, you can pump, come back and do what you need. And also we'll accommodate your time. So you don't have to go back and forth with your supervisor, like, hey, I really need an hour, because it takes an hour most of the time. I need an hour. No, this is not my lunchtime. I need this time so I can pump milk. Um, and I need to be relaxed. And there are so many things that go into it. And so we made those safe spaces so that we didn't have to put lactating women in a place where they had to say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I consider something else, even when they loved what they're doing. We
Yeah.
wanted to make sure they didn't have to pick between the job and the family.
Like sticking them in a toilet stall. Like that is
Right. It
unacceptable.
is unacceptable. And believe it or not, many women have that story at previous jobs, but we didn't want that to be the story here. So,
I love it. I love it. And one thing that I think, I don't know if you said it or if someone in the audience said it when you were presenting on this, but talked about how when you're full, you start actually having like sickness symptoms. And like
yeah.
I totally should have known that because I watched my wife do this multiple
Yeah,
times.
well,
But it
you
was
get a fever because the I forgot the area that produces the milk. If it gets clogged because you haven't been able to release the milk in time, it clogs, and then after it clogs, of course, like anything else in your body that it is not coming out, it can produce in fever format. So the last thing we need is our officers not being well. We need them to be
absolutely.
well so that they can do the job.
I love it. How do you ever get requests from groups and you're like, yeah, this doesn't actually fall within equity and inclusion? And if so, what do you use as your like as a filter? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you use as, hey, this is something we need to address. We need to listen more. And I'm not saying like a stark yes or no. No, that isn't. Yes, this is. But do you have a way of processing the type of inquiries or requests that
Yes,
come?
yes. No, it's a really good question. With time, I have learned that most equity and inclusion issues it's just my professional opinion. Most equity and inclusion issues are based on inefficiencies. And so what happens is that when I can solve for the equity issue, it's like an organizational solve that just needs to get implemented for everyone eventually. So
Yeah.
you kind of do the baseline solve and then the rest just goes into the fabric of the organization. So a good example is let's take since we're on the topic of females today, shout out to the females out there
They're
listening.
near and dear to my heart. So let's talk about this.
Yes. So let's take the topic of working doubles, right? And becoming a CO of a precinct. Let's take like becoming the head of a precinct. Most likely, if you were the head of a precinct, you're captain, even if you're next so under any of those circumstances, you were working multiple hours and you also have to be accessible.
Yeah.
Now, let's take that in combination with being a head of household. Let's say you don't have a spouse at this moment, a partner in your life. Let's say you have two children in connection, right? But so the job may require you to be available at longer times than school is available, right?
Yeah.
School ends at 3, but the job doesn't end at 3, right? And so, and that's pretty universal everywhere you go. Like everyone's like, can you extend school or make work hours shorter? Like, what is the happy family
And
medium here?
the teachers are saying no.
Because you're like saying no, they're like, no, thanks. But that's a great example. When you look at it from the practical perspective, you're seeing a missed opportunity and talent. If someone picks, hey, I really cannot. You have 4. I have 4 children. And right now I cannot take longer work hours. So here we are with this great, talented, let's say female officer who may opt out of that situation, not because anyone's telling her she can't do it, not because she doesn't feel like she can't do it, it's not an inspiration, but because operationally her day-to-day requires a larger pool than it would a male officer who may be in the same exact circumstances, but may not have the same domestic responsibility. And so there is a disproportionate responsibility. This is a societal issue. I can't solve for this yet. Maybe one day that would be the next endeavor. Sorry for high societal issues, but where females in general do take on a lot of the domestic responsibilities in the household, right? That traditionally has been the situation. I'm not saying it happens in everybody's household, but it does disproportionate happen. So it means they are also more likely to not take on higher ranking positions. For us, that's a huge inefficiency
Mm.
because we need female representation. We need that balance of perspective. That
Yeah.
balance of perspective will show you there is research that says that female officers tend to have lower CCRBs, less aggressive, reactive behavior. They're more likely to solve a case quickly. There's so many of just evidence along having that perspective in leading a precinct. The community is more likely to trust when there's a lead that is female. So we can't afford not to have that perspective at a balance, meaning we need the community to trust us.
Yeah.
NYPD needs to have that healthy balance between community trust. And so the way you do that is by building it in-house, which means we have to change the way we operationalize our day-to-day. And that's a lot of what we're doing. We've been working with the police commissioner's office, with the chief of department's office, which our first steps office, who's the highest ranking female in the department, to start looking at what are the operational things that we know are impeding women from moving up the ladder. And we're just kind of like, you know, trying to tap those things out so that they can, so that if, hey, if you don't want to take on a larger role, it's not because we couldn't make a structural change in it.
Yeah. And then let's say there's I really can relate, and I have a story here in a little bit that applied here in my region. Um, so let's say the hours aren't working because of some other requirements, whether it be picking up kids.
Mhm.
Is there ways that you can allow people to work remotely to where they're still accessible by phone? Is there ways for you
I
to
mean,
have an XO that kind of overlaps to where the
yeah.
XO covers some of the in-station responsibilities while the commanding officer is, working on adjusted hours?
Yes, all of the above. So you'll see that there's a heavier, um, there's a, there is a heavier understanding that you can utilize your Excel if you're the commanding officer. And that's true for everyone, right? So it's not just females, right? It's
That's where I was
everyone.
going next.
Everyone wants to have that balance. If you're a dad, you also want to be at the soccer game with your kid. If you're a mom, you want to be at the soccer game with your kid. We are no longer in a place of society where we were seeing dads wanting to opt out of family life. And it's not healthy to do that, right? We know
Yeah.
that already. There's a lot of research showing that, which means workplaces have to adopt to those items. I'll give you two initiatives that we're doing now. We launched what's called the Women's Institute at the department, which specifically focuses on helping women navigate through the department, helping them learn what it is to get into the detective bureau. How do you make sure that you can be part of special operations, or take a look at how, if you wanted to be part of the budget management team, that you can do that. How did the police commissioner's office work? Those spaces where it may be hard, like seem like hard to get into, just how do you navigate through such a large department and also have an inspiring space where you can meet other women who have already done it. We launched that so we can begin a pipeline of women. We've had 300 officially will be going through. We had 100. We launched it 2 years ago, so we've done two cohorts. And we're gonna launch the new cohort next month.
I love it. And just what I love specifically about it is when we see other people that we relate with, that we can connect with, I feel like it gives us this clearer vision. Because I don't know about you, but most of the limits in my life have been self-imposed.
Of
Most,
course, everybody.
most,
Yep.
right? Most of the
Mhm.
limits are in my mind. And when I've had a mentor, someone who I look at and go, I relate with this person for whatever
Right.
reason, when that person can take me and mentor me and push me and speak truth into my life, that's how I've really overcome those obstacles.
Yeah, and it's such a good point because part of the reason we also started a path to mentorship program that also comes out of my office. And a lot of that work is because we find that if you're a first-time officer, which means you're most likely from an underrepresented community, it is likely that your first 2, 3 years, in terms of the challenges you go through, we could either keep you or lose you, right? Because if you don't have
Yeah.
somebody that you can talk to, if you don't have someone who's been through it, you're the first one in your family. It's no different than deciding to go to college, right? You
Yeah.
can get lost in a very big world. So the mentorship program that we started focuses in on members of service who have been in the department less than 5 years. We take some that are 10 or below. And we partner them with someone who's 3, 4 ranks above them. That way, and they have to be in the area of interest of where they see themselves in the next year. So let's say I'm an officer and I want to learn more about how to be an attorney. I'm going to partner you with the legal bureau, right? The head of the legal bureau or the captain of the legal bureau. That way you have a sense of how to get there, and your mentor is letting you know. And in addition to that, we do with them sponsorship days throughout the years where they actually get to see what a day in the life of the things that they say they want to do 5 to 10 years from now looks like.
Yeah.
And that program has been extremely important. That's an equity program. But that's a program that really everyone needs, right? The
Yes.
equity issue is that there's a disproportionate number of people who come from underrepresented communities who don't have mentors. But the need for mentorship is a need across the board, right? That has
Yes.
nothing to do with that. You just said it. Like when you have someone that can guide you, that's why we have parents, right? Like
Yeah.
we just come into the world and then they're like, bye, have a good day, right? Guidance is necessary for human growth. So it answers your previous question in that, well, what do? You build it so that you can stabilize the grounds on it with the idea that really this should be a program that should be established for all.
Yeah. And the applicable story from our region is in Washington state, there's one police training academy for the entire state.
Mm.
Not including our troopers, our state patrol, but for everyone else, there's one training commission that you have to go to the academy with, which means that when we would hire a candidate, we had to send them over to Seattle, 3.5 hours away.
Oh, wow.
And they had to live there Monday through Friday, right? And
Wow.
they could come home on the weekends, but how about for a single mom or a single dad? Can they join the police force? Absolutely not. And so
Right, right.
I was one of our recruiters,
And
and I
that's
would
an
have
operational, right? That's
yes,
operational. You would never think like, oh, well, I did it. Everyone needs to do it. Everyone makes the sacrifice. I had to sacrifice. You should too. But that's not what equity says. Equity says the goal is to bring people in from different perspectives. So if that's the goal, then we need to change where we give access to this academy,
yes.
right?
And thankfully, the state approved it.
Mhm.
Our region, one of the police chiefs here, really started pushing the state on this. And what they did was they opened up regional training academies, same curriculum, same oversight from the
Well,
training
yeah, that's
commission, because
great.
that's required by law. But now we can hire talented individuals that can come to work. And actually, this is harder. When I was at the police academy, it was really easy to go there and just focus on being a student Monday through Friday. For the
Right.
folks that have to balance that and still be a mom or a dad or a son or a daughter or whatever their roles are in life,
Mhm.
and be successful, it's super hard, but it's opening the door and allowing them to do it because we have these regional academies around the state now.
Right. Right. No, that's a perfect story of how there's my son's school, there was a teacher. I loved her so much. She used to say, if it impacts one student, it impacts all students. And I thought that was she was very sweet, just a sweet way to look at. For me, I saw it through the lens of equity, of course, because it's true. If it impacts a smaller community, then it means the whole community is really suffering, right? Because it means we haven't done our work so that everyone can kind of fit into the model.
Yeah. I still feel like there's people that have these rumblings. Oh my gosh, we're talking about equity. What,
Yes.
how do you disarm that? Like when I'm guarantee you have to, and maybe because you're deputy commissioner, people don't say that around you, but I
No,
bet.
I mean, of course, people always rumble around that. Look, when I was starting the Women's Institute, of course, there were all these murmurs. You hear people like, what about the Men's Institute? And it's like, okay, yes, it's not that there isn't a need to have an institute that focus. It's just that the disparaging need is this particular one, right? So when you have a department just like ours, where you have uh 70 to 80% male and 20 to 30% female, then we do have to figure out how's that 30% doing, right? Because we're the Office of Equity. So I want to know what the 30% is thinking. I want to know what the 20% is thinking. Now, if I had a department that was 50-50, then that's telling me a different story that I'm not going to be looking into those particular. I'm going to go somewhere else where we're seeing, and it would be true if it was flipped. If it was, look at the Department of Education. I'm sure they think about things like, wow, we have 90% female teachers. Like, how do we recruit more males? Because we need males in classrooms. We need young boys to sit in a classroom and see another male teaching in the front. That holds true in reverse as well. Anywhere where there is too much homogeneity, where it's all sameness, it doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't matter how it is. You always do better. Even in, that's true for business cases, that's true for making decisions across the table where you have these kind of diverse perspective, experience, and opinions. So when people say to me, ah, you know, I see it more as a lack of, I can tell that that particular person, if I see that they have that remark, they see it as a form of exclusion to themselves. So a
Okay.
lot of that is because they're not seeing that they're benefiting themselves. But like, I'll go back to this, let's go back to the lactation, to
Yeah.
the lactation piece, right?
Yeah.
Um, if if you have 10 people that are on roll call, I'm just thinking about smaller departments, right? Or let's say you have five that are going out that day, they're sending a roll call, and two of them are women. One of them is lactating, the other one is not. And the female who sees the other female that's lactating have no place to go. What do you think that other female is gonna say? I don't think I want to do this anymore because I do want to start a family eventually. And look how hard it's been for her. I haven't even seen. So now you have five people and
100%.
you lost two.
Yes.
And now on the efficiency level, you're left with how many?
Now you're asking me to do math, Wendy. Not
Right.
very many.
Well, you're left with three, right? Because if you have five, you're left with three.
I couldn't
And
remember if we were at 5 or 10.
so really from a structural perspective, you are losing the ability to protect,
Yes, you are.
right? You're losing the ability to answer the robbery call. Because if two of your officers are out for whatever the reason it is, that's less people doing job on the street. That's so when there's a crisis and you call 911, how can I help you? And we have the dispatcher taking the call. Who do you think is going out to knock on the door and find out if everything's okay? Those
Yep.
folks were on roll call that day. And
Yep.
so that those kind of things, when people can see that picture, they tend to go, oh yes, we should really have lactation pods everywhere because
Yes.
now it's impacting the bottom line, right?
Yeah. Or I
Um,
think I think it also impacts us when we have someone who we care about, right? It's easy for us to be us and them in life. And as long as you can demonize or throw people into the them category, it's easy for us to develop these hard hearts. But as soon as it's us, as
right.
soon as and again, it's near and dear to my heart, specifically the lactation pods, because of the fact that have a wife and nothing but girls, that this is something that they're going to encounter at some point.
Yep.
And the other topics we've talked about too. I have friends that fall into these different categories if we're going to, put people in categories. And
Yeah.
so once you care about another human being, then it's like, well, yeah, I want people to be treated with respect. I want us to support John or Sue or Juan or
Right.
whoever it
Exactly.
is, right?
Exactly.
I think that's the challenge though that we run into is we pick these, I say we, in society, we pick these
Yeah.
sides, we draw up these battle lines, and if we would just come together and listen to each other and show each other at least the mutual respect as humans, I want to listen to you and hear the challenges you're experiencing. Oh, wow, are you serious? You don't think you could
Yeah.
ever be a CO? Well, tell me more about that.
Right.
Oh, wow, we could probably overcome that. That's
Right.
doable, right?
Right. Right.
Wow. I love
Yeah,
the
but and just create the structure that allows people to that they if my general thoughts are you wanna the ideal equitable space is a space where we build it for you already, right? Where you're like, I'll just use the lactation pod. Like, what are you talking about? Like what do you I'll just have the baby and I'll have the lactation pod when I come back. Like, of course, like it's the of course I have that access already. And
yes.
you're like, yeah, I'm just not taking it because I don't feel like it. Okay, that's fine. I'd rather you not feel like it. But I don't want you to not take it because of some barrier that we could have fixed.
Yeah. Well, and again, I get back to that regional police academy. We had people not. We have a hiring crisis in Washington State. There, every once in a while, I'll find a police agency that's fully staffed, but on the most part, when
Right.
you look at Seattle PD, they are down a lot of officers, and so for us to remove these barriers that there's no reason to have them when we can solve this problem. Anytime it's like, well, we can't do that. Well, why can't we do it? If we're the leaders, let's create solutions and solve these
Right.
problems so that we don't have, because understaffed, and that impacts everyone. It impacts
Yep.
every single employee in the organization when we're working short and we have talented human beings out there to hire. Let's figure out how to solve these problems.
Yep. Agree. Agree. I couldn't agree with you more.
I love it. Well,
There's nothing like solving for 177 years of of
yes,
historical barriers.
man. Well, for the listeners, I want them to hear this too, Wendy. You and I had the opportunity because to just have side conversation as well. So yes, I listened to you give your talk, and I thought it was remarkable. But I got the chance
Thank
to
you.
sit there and listen to your heart as well. I feel like, and so that's where I really was like, oh my gosh, I hope I can convince this
Thank
deputy
you.
commissioner to come on my podcast because I love the work you're doing. And really, New York Police Department being as large as it is, it has the opportunity to set precedent, to set good examples, just set great examples of how to treat our people well that I think the rest of us can learn from.
Well, definitely. For me, it's a great honor. I think I spoke to you a little bit about, we have a program we're in the middle of launching now, still is getting completed. It's for the deaf and hard of hearing community. And we're getting our officers, we're in the midst of getting our officers certified so that they can respond to those calls of members who are deaf or hard of hearing and need someone who speaks who signs. Uh, that's huge. Right now, there is no other department that has done that. So when we finish, we'll be the first ones. And can you imagine coming from the deaf or hard of hearing community, having a crisis just like anybody else, and not having someone who can sign to you, who can communicate at the time where you need, where communication is the most critical piece of information to help protect that person. So that's something that I'm really proud. The police commissioner, the chief of department, the first dep, they've put so much just investment so that our office can launch this. And everyone is excited about it. That's the best part, just watching everyone like, did we finish? Are we there? What part of the project are we in? But really, it's just a benefit that's going to have to the 8 million New Yorkers, to the
Yes.
100,000 deaf or hard of hearing individuals, to their family members who maybe normally were the ones who had to be there when something happened, but God forbid they couldn't be there at that moment, that they felt guilty, like, man, I didn't know this happened to you. I wish I was there that day. Now, at the very minimal, we can ensure we're going to begin, we're going to start because it'll take a while, but we'll begin to, at the very minimal, start having officers who will at least know 4 basic signs around, can I help you? Can I get you an ambulance? We're gonna have every officer trained on 4 basic signs of emergency needs. And then we're gonna take a group and we're gonna get them certified so that they can also communicate in sign language for those emergency situations. So that's things like that. The department is just, we are trying, this administration, especially the mayoral administration, is putting so much strategy around serving on the underserved. And you can see it. You see, I mean, not just in NYPD, you see it in other agencies too, but I can tell you here in PD, there's not one person in this office that's not dedicated to doing that work. Like, we're all really just banding together to try to focus on that.
I've seen that help. We one of our officers at Kennewick, it's only a 108 officer agency, but one of our officers had a family member who is deaf, hard of hearing, and so he knew sign, right? So
Right.
we didn't do it as an initiative, but I saw the impact when
Yeah.
someone's having their worst day imaginable, and now you have someone who shows up on scene that can listen to them. We're getting back to listening here, Wendy,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It's getting
Yes.
right back. Having someone on
Yes.
scene that can listen to them or communicate on some level to try to get them the help that they need is so significant. And yeah, I love to hear, the energy behind that because that's not easy, especially an
Yeah.
agency of your size. The time and the money that's going to take, it's not easy to get time to train, and that's going to
Yeah.
take effort.
Yep. Yes, definitely. And if you listen to the officers that as of right now have completed the first part of their training and they're going into the second piece, all of them are children, the majority of them are children of deaf or hard of hearing adults, parents, and or have a sibling or a brother who have that same, so they understand the cultural nuances, the family nuances behind that. It's not just that learning sign language, they also get the day-to-day understanding of what it's like to be in a family, and there's just so much benefit that we get out of that as a department, that honing into those skill sets and that life experience is going to, I think, change the department forever. It really, and it's going to change the way we do safety.
I love it. Wendy, we could talk on and on, but I know both you and I are busy people.
Yes.
For the listeners that hadn't heard your voice before, if they wanted to try to connect with you, communicate with you, what's the best ways for them to reach out?
Yes, you can follow me at Equity at NYPD. On Instagram, we have a post that goes up daily and it'll talk to you everything. You'll hear about the mentorship program, you'll hear about the Women's Institute, you'll get to see live sort of pictures around that. You'll hear about the ASL certification program, how we do lactation pods, and some new initiatives that we're doing to get more representation on highway patrol and get more representation in our special ops unit, everything from our bomb squad to our attorneys. So yeah.
I love it. Well, for the listeners, I'm going to make that real easy. The link will be down in the show notes. Deputy Commissioner Garcia, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more of this stuff, and you've given me an awful lot of yours. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything that you do in getting the word out there.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye. And bye, everybody listening.
Wow, folks, what did you think about my interview with Commissioner Garcia? I hope you enjoyed it. And again, regardless of whether you agree or disagree, I'm hoping it gives you perspective. If you agree, why? If you disagree, why? That's what we're trying to do here on the podcast. Trying to build relationships with other humans, trying to listen, right? If we can start in our homes and do a better job of listening to each other, go another ring out and go out to our neighbors and do a good job of listening to them. If we can carry that forward into our workplaces and into our churches and really truly listen to other human beings. When I'm done listening, I don't have to agree with you. I can go, wow, that's an interesting perspective. I haven't thought about it that way before. And then we can continue our life, maybe not agreeing, or maybe agreeing. I don't know. Hey folks, Jaimie and I want to know how you feel about the podcast, even if some of that feeling is disagreement. We'd really like for you to communicate back to us how we're doing. There's a few different ways for you to do that. First and foremost, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That will cause the next episode to come up in your dashboard. You can also rate and review us, especially if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. There's 5 stars waiting on our main page. We'd really appreciate a 5-star rating, folks, if we've earned all 5 of those stars. And if we haven't, keep your stars. Instead, shoot me an email at chris@gravityct.com. Let us know how to make a better future Marriage Monday topics or guests for me to interview. Folks, we only get to live this life once. Let's go out and take care of the people in our tribes. Take care of each other. God bless.